for your information here on Ramadan Radio Wolves 87.8 FM. Now, I'm your host, Alvina Ali, bringing you another insightful and thought-provoking episode where we discuss topics that impact our community. Now, today we're diving into an incredibly important topic, mental health, specifically in the Muslim community. Now, we are joined by a very special guest, Madiha Arshad from Birmingham City University, who is here to talk about the IM adapted study. Now, this research trial is currently looking for participants, and it's a chance for us to come together as a community to make a difference in understanding mental health support. Now, mental health, as always, remains a taboo subject in many communities. And for young Muslim women, there may be additional challenges in seeking support. Now, this study aims to explore faith-based elements in cognitive behavioral therapy, in short, CBT. Now, to see if they can better support individuals from other backgrounds. Now, if you or somebody you know is struggling, this conversation is for you. So, before we get into it, just a reminder that you can watch this show back on YouTube and Facebook at Ramadan Radio Wolves. Right, let's get started then. So, Madiha, welcome to the show.
Hello, and thank you for having me.
You're welcome. It's great to have you here. Excellent topic of discussion that we are going to be talking about. Now, to start off then, can you tell us a little bit about the IM adapted study?
Yeah, so the IM Adapted project is a feasibility study that's evaluating a new faith-based CBT therapy developed by the Inspirited Minds charity for young Muslim women. The program is being delivered in Birmingham and London for young Muslim women aged between 18 and 24 who may be experiencing low mood or depression. So those, essentially how it works is those who participate will be assigned into one or two groups. The first group will be it will be group therapy. The first group will be assigned to the new faith-based program, which has been developed to reflect the Muslim faith and culture, or the second group would be a standard support group that kind of likens to the programs that are offered on the NHS, so just a regular CBT program. Yeah. The sessions, they will be delivered in local masjids and community centres by trained mental health professionals once a week for 6 weeks. And all that we kind of ask is that participants attend those sessions, and then they will be asked to complete a series of questionnaires for the duration of the programme. And then 6 months after the programme to help our researchers understand how useful the sessions have been. And what we aim to do essentially is test the feasibility of implementing a faith-based, culturally adapted intervention for young Muslim women. You know, can integrating Islamic practices into a mental health intervention benefit young Muslim women?
Okay. Right, that sounds all really interesting. Now, for those who may not be familiar what exactly cognitive behavioral therapy is, in short CBT, can you explain a bit more?
So CBT essentially stands for cognitive behavioral therapy. It's a type of talking therapy that's based around the idea that our thoughts, our feelings and behaviors are all connected. And if we can change the way that we think, then we can change how we feel and how we act. So, for example, if you interpret a situation negatively, you might experience negative emotions from that. And then those bad feelings or those negative emotions might lead you to behave in a certain way. So CBT essentially aims to identify negative thought patterns. For example, you might fail a test and then it's like, oh, I'm a failure. And then we challenge those thoughts instead and replace them with more balanced ones. So instead of I'm a succeed on this occasion, next time. Now, that's offered on the NHS right now. First choice treatment, particularly for anxiety and depression. It accounts for about 60 to 70% of therapy delivered through the NHS talking therapies. So if you were to go into your GP and say that I'm dealing with anxiety, will probably be assigned to a CBT therapist for a treatment option.
Okay, so tell me then, why may it be beneficial then to integrate faith-based elements into CBT?
Yeah, so I think there's a few reasons. The first is therapy requires an individual to be very open and honest. It requires a sense of vulnerability, and that can only really be obtained if an individual feels understood. Now, without that cultural sensitivity, clients might feel judged or misunderstood,
Yeah.
and that can lead or discourage them from seeking help.
Okay.
Now, on the flip side of that, if therapy can be respectful and understanding of a person's cultural or religious background, they are more likely to feel understood and safe, which will enable them to engage in the treatment better. And then another reason I think as well is when it comes to Muslims in particular, we know that our faith is a great source of comfort to us, especially during troubling times. I think Muslims tend to see life struggles through a spiritual lens.
Yeah.
So combining psychological interventions with Islamic principles and practices can provide a more meaningful and effective healing approach for Muslims in particular. And also it makes mental health care feel more approachable to Muslims, which I think is really important.
Okay.
We know that therapy works best when coping techniques fit a person's life and beliefs.
Okay. So why does this particular study then focus on young Muslim women, and what are some of the challenges then that they may face regarding mental health?
Yeah, I think the age range between ages of 18 and 24, those of us have been through it, or those of us who are going through that age range right now, we know it's quite a transformative era in our life.
Yeah.
You know, you're navigating a lot of transitions, you're gaining a lot more independence, you're going to university, getting your first job, you're moving out, you know, there's a lot going on at that time.
Yeah.
And we know that young adults are at a higher risk of mental health issues because of some of those life stresses and because of some of those experiences that they go through at that time. But for young Muslim women in particular, not only do they have those stresses, but there's additional unique challenges, especially in the UK.
Okay.
You know, we have increased amounts of Islamophobia and discrimination, especially for those who outwardly appear more Muslim, women who wear the headscarf, they're more likely to receive prejudice and discrimination, which can impact your self-esteem. We've got family and social pressures, identity struggles, racism stereotypes, you know, and then trying to grapple with Western ideas of success, navigating faith and overcoming stigmas around mental health. There's a range of different issues that young Muslim women are dealing with that are very independent and unique to being a young Muslim woman. And I think each of these issues individually are difficult, but when you combine them all together to face those kinds of challenges alone is tough for anyone to deal with.
Now, that's such an important point that you've made there. So what are some of the common misconceptions about mental health in the Muslim community then?
Oh, so many come to mind. I think there's a lot. I do think that the wave is changing when it comes to the approach to mental health in the Muslim community, but I definitely still think there's a lot of awful misconceptions. I mean, the most one that comes to mind straight away is, you know, mental health struggles are a sign of weak faith.
Yeah.
You know, even, you know, to say that like, oh, you just don't have, you know, faith in God. You just don't pray enough. You're just a bad Muslim. That's why you're feeling like this. I mean, that's just completely false. We know that going through hardships in life is just a part of living. You know, even the Prophet, peace be upon him, he experienced sadness and stress, especially if you look at, you know, in this year, the year of sorrow, you know, so hardship and struggle and going through difficulties, especially mentally, is a normal part of life. So that's a one misconception. And then you've also got this idea of like, oh, you know, to treat your mental health, you just need to pray more Quran, or you need to just do more dhikr, or and I'm like, you know, I'm not saying that faith-based practices don't help or can support you when you're going through something difficult, but that's not the only thing you need. You need sometimes it's important to seek professional help alongside faith-based practices and things like that. So that's another one. We've got, you know, the idea that mental illness isn't really real and it's just people who are overthinking and they're just stressed out. But, you know, it is a real condition, and we know it is because for people with PTSD or depression, you know, we found that there's chemical imbalances that happen in the brain, and so it is a real illness, and it is a real problem. It's not just somebody who's overthinking or stressful. It can be quite complex, and there are a lot of elements that influence it and lead to mental health problems. And then there's so much more. You know, people who think there's jinn possession or black magic, or even like the concept of, you know, mental health is a Western concept, and it's not for Muslims. I think that's also very silly, especially because we know we belong to a faith that emphasizes the importance of self-care, and also talks about emotional struggles in the Quran and Sunnah as well. So yeah.
Okay. I think
Amul Huzn in Arabic. That was a time where, for those of us who don't know the Prophet, peace be upon him, he went through a really horrible period where there was so much hardship that he was facing. You know, at this time he lost his wife Khadija radiallahu anha, his uncle Abu Talib, and there was also increased persecution and oppression of the Muslims in Mecca at the time by the Quraysh tribe. So there was can you imagine going through your own personal losses, dealing with grief, seeing your people struggling because of the faith they choose to follow. There's a lot that he was going through at that time, a lot of difficult hardship that most people wouldn't be able to face. And he never once, the Prophet, peace be upon him, he never once said that he was fine. He felt comfortable expressing his grief. He felt comfortable expressing his sorrow. He would cry. There's a narration where the Prophet, peace be upon him, was in a market and he saw Khadija radiallahu anha's necklace for sale, and he saw the necklace and he broke down and he cried, and he said he misses his wife. And I just think that type of vulnerability and that emotional awareness and being so emotionally transparent is super important. It's part of the faith. We're allowed to have emotions. Our Prophet taught us that emotions are a part of life, and that struggle is a part of life. But I think what's the most important thing, and what Islam does for Muslims and in helping us and supporting us when we're going through struggles, is knowing that Allah promised us that in the Quran, verily with every hardship comes ease. فَإِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا. Verily with every hardship comes ease. The Allah and Islam is a source of comfort for us. We're taught to, in the face of hardship, we have patience, we have sabr, we have tawakkul, we have faith in God, and we have hope that all hardships and all discomforts that we're going through, all trials and challenges that we're going through, they do have an ending. They're not forever. Nothing in this life lasts forever.
That's true.
And I think through the Prophet's example, he taught us how to be emotionally resilient, how to be strong in the face of adversity, in the face of hardship, but also how to be okay and accept that not every day is a happy day, and not every day you have to you have to feel okay. It's okay sometimes to not. It's okay to accept grief. It's okay to be sad. Things.
I totally agree with you. Obviously, Islam does encourage seeking knowledge and taking care of our well-being as well. Now, obviously, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, also spoke about the importance of both spiritual and physical health. So, listeners, seeking medical or psychological help does not mean a lack of faith, like you said. It means that you are taking responsibility for your well-being, which Islam strongly supports anyway. So, Madia, how can our listeners then get involved with the study?
So if you go to iamadaptedstudy.co.uk, there will be a self-referral form on the front of the website. You can fill that in, give your location, and then somebody from the team will be back in touch to get in touch with you. So anybody who is from Birmingham or London who's interested in participating, like I said, you must be a young Muslim woman between the ages of 18 and 24, experiencing low mood or depression. You don't actually have to be formally diagnosed with anything, but we do go through our own criterion and checklists to make sure that you meet the standards of receiving the therapy. And then somebody will definitely be in contact with you from the team to sort of further on your participation in the study.
Lovely. And just remind us, what age group is this study for?
So it's 18 to 24-year-old women.
Lovely. I've got a question that's come in, and they've said they've heard about CBT before, but how is it different when faith-based elements are included?
So I think one of the aspects is that you take something like CBT that looks at promoting more positive thought processes and taking more positive actions and looking at things in a more positive outlook, and you're integrating elements of the Quran and Sunnah into that. So for example, if a young woman comes in and says, is experiencing feelings of hopelessness because their life has been a struggle, or there's been certain things that's led to them feeling hopeless, you can remind them with a Quran ayah like, فَإِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا, verily with every hardship comes ease, and things like that can sort of bring peace and comfort to Muslims in particular. And like I said before, faith is a massive part of our coping and our healing journey as Muslims. It's integral, I think.
Yeah.
So just having those reminders like implemented into an already successful CBT therapy can just be a bit more personalized for the Muslim mindset and for the Muslim mentality.
Okay. So is mental health then really an issue in the Muslim community, or is it just something that's sort of being talked about more now then?
I think it is definitely an issue. I think it's always been an issue. But it hasn't really been spoken about until I think very recently. But we also know that Muslims are less likely to actually receive or reach out for mental health support, like through the NHS and things like that. We're more likely to sort of because again I suppose it's one of those things, it's the stigmas and the stereotypes that we're taught as young, like this is not for us, and just read more Quran and pray more sunnah. So we have all these negative stereotypes and these sort of misconceptions attached to the faith, and it sort of limits Muslims from reaching out or talking openly about their mental health, because for fear of judgment, you know, if I say I've got depression, somebody's just going to say, oh, she's probably not that religious, she probably doesn't pray. So there's a lot of stigmas out there that exist and misconceptions that exist that stop, I think, Muslims in the past from being able to openly speak about their struggles with mental health. But it is so normal. It is so normal to go through hardship. It's so normal to not feel your best. And that's part of life. And therapy doesn't mean that, you know, you're not good enough, or does it mean that, you know, you're too far gone? Anyone can have therapy. Sometimes therapy is just a way to help you cope. And I think this is a good friend of mine once said to me, everyone should go to therapy. And I agree with that, because sometimes it's just about having an outlet. Sometimes it's just about having someone to talk to and to help sort of relay your feelings and your emotions, because life is challenging and it's fast paced and it's hard. So I think the Muslim community, whilst I think it's changing, it's just about us. Like I said, that's why things like this need to exist, because if we showcase that actually mental health and Islam are interlinked and they're related, then it sort of breaks that stigma and that stereotype where where before there was a barrier, particularly for Muslims, when it comes to obtaining mental health or seeking mental health support.
So, I mean, I know there's loads of people out there who are suffering in silence. So just a message to the listeners, really. Studies like this, the IM adapted program, can help them provide tailored solutions, I would say. And obviously, like you says, it'll acknowledge cultural and religious needs as well. Brilliant. So what if someone needs help then with mental health, but they are scared that their family won't understand? And how would you direct them, and what should they do?
That's always very difficult, because I think especially in our communities, like family and things, it's an important part, and nobody wants to look a certain way. But I think when it comes to your mental health, I know sometimes it's easy to feel afraid of judgment or what your family will say. But also we have to understand that in our religion, it's so important to take care of yourself and to look after yourself and to look after your body as an amana. That goes for your body and for your mind too. And if you're not in a good way, you need to be able to communicate and say, look, this is how I'm feeling. And I know that you might not understand it, but I need support and I need help. And just trying to relay that back. And again, like knowing about our faith, reading the Quran and the Sunnah, looking at Hadith, you'll realize that mental health and going through periods of you know, sadness or worry or grief or whatever it might be is part of life. And Islam acknowledges this, the Quran acknowledges this. So being very open and honest about what it is you're going through. And not everyone's going to understand. Not everyone is going to understand, but you have to learn to understand that I can't be accepted by everyone. Not everyone is always going to be accepting of the fact that this is my reality. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't go out and seek support when you need it. So go to your GP, talk to somebody, talk to a trusted family friend or a friend, somebody that you know. Sometimes your family might not be understanding, and that's okay. I think that's also another thing to acknowledge, that sometimes you do your best, you make your best efforts, but ultimately that's not always the way things are. So
so a good approach there then is to start small, talk to someone that you trust, talk to some organizations, and find the confidence and it's all confidential as well, isn't it? The support
Yes.
that they're given as well.
Yes.
Excellent. Now, if I have, say, for example, a friend and I need to support them, or a family member who may be struggling with their mental health, how can I do that? You know, like there's some organizations that might be afraid not to talk to someone or whatever. And if I want to step in and do something for them, how can I support them?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is letting them know that you're there for them. If you need to talk.
Yeah.
That's important. Sometimes that's all somebody needs.
Yeah.
Just that acknowledgement that's like, I'm here for you. If you need me, I'm right here. You know where to find me. You know where to call me. That's important. That's the most important thing that you can do for someone.
Yeah.
And it's not so much about pushing them to share with you or you know, saying, what can I do? Like, because at the end of the day, you need to give that individual the autonomy.
Yeah.
Not everybody's in a position where they want to receive help yet. And if you force them too much or you push them too much, it can actually end up doing the opposite of what you intend it to do. So just saying, here's a shoulder, here's an arm, here's a face to talk to if you need to, just letting them know about that.
Brilliant.
You can direct them to a bunch of resources. The Muslim Women's Helpline is a really great resource for those especially in the Muslim community who are struggling, because again, like I said, you've got people to talk to online who understand the cultural struggles. And I think like I said before as well, like the struggles that Muslim women might be having, or Muslims in general, are very unique to what I suppose an everyday person would be struggling, because they're very related to family, they could be related to identity, they could even be related to religion itself, religious guilt, for example. So resources like the Muslim Women Helpline is brilliant, because they'll understand those and have that cultural sensitivity, and it's someone that you can sort of just pass on a number to and say, hey, if you need to speak to someone, here's someone.
Lovely.
You go.
That's great. So where can our listeners find more information then about this study and potentially sign up?
Yeah, so it's imadaptedstudy.co.uk. You can find a bunch of information about the study, how far we progressed, study updates and things like that. And then again, like I said, there's a self-referral form on the website where you can just sign up yourself.
Brilliant. Right. So a huge thank you then to the lovely Madea Arshad for joining us today, and also shedding on some light on such an important topic as well. Mental health is something that we all need to talk about more, and it's amazing to see efforts being made to make support more accessible for our community as well. So if you're interested in taking part in the I Am Adapted study, don't hesitate to reach out. Your involvement could make a real difference. And to all our listeners then as well. Now, this marks the final episode of FYI for this year. It's been an incredible journey bringing you these discussions and resources, and we'll be back next year with more inspiring and informative content. Until then, take care of yourselves, stay informed, and Assalamu alaikum.